Hey tubers, welcome back for another adventure. We bought Ugly here, which is a 1985 TRX250. A couple of weeks ago, we spent $400 on it. When I got it, it started. You had to use the Kickstarter, and it ran and it moved, but the key switch was completely gone. The handlebar switch wasn't completely functional, and there was an open circuit between the key switch and the handlebar switch, which prevented power from getting here, which prevented the starter from going. Anyway, we fixed all that, which is nice, but you could see it's got a major problem left. It is hard to start. My buddy Steve likes to call an all-terrain vehicle that's hard to start lawn art, or an unusable all-terrain vehicle. If they don't start easy, you just walk by them and grab something else that does start, or you grab a wheelbarrow, or you just walk, because it's a lot of work to stand on here and kick the heck out of it, or grind on it till the battery dies, or whatever. Anyway, there's a simple solution for this. Costs somewhere around 20 bucks. The OEM carburetor on this thing is a Kevin constant velocity model. The way the choke works is you move that, a little plunger slides up, and it richens up the fuel mixture. This carburetor is 37 years old. And even when it was new, it wasn't the greatest carburetor in the world. So, what do I recommend? I personally recommend a carburetor with a butterfly. They seem to start easier than the ones with the enrichment circuit, particularly that OEM one. You could get a PZ30, which has enough fuel to run a 250cc engine. They cost somewhere around 15 bucks, eBay item. 20 bucks on Amazon perhaps. So you need that carburetor. Then you need to fetch yourself up an 1.5-inch end cap, which is right here. You can see this is a $3 piece of brass. It's 1.2 millimeters thick. If you use copper for this, you got to go a little thicker because copper has a tendency to be flexible. So anyway, you got this, and eventually you're going to want to do that, but you want to put the holes in the right place such that the carburetor bolts up, and this slips into the intake manifold, which is a flange type. So, to do this, how do you figure this out? You got to get the distance between these holes. If you go for the outside distance and then the inside distance, add them together and then divide by 2, that'll give you the center of these two holes. And you use a caliper to do that. Once you do that, and particularly if you do it on lined graph paper, you just pick the middle, draw a straight line perpendicular right with the lined graph paper, and if you go an 1/8 inch low, right, that's where the center of this hole is, right? Mark that on a piece of paper, bing, 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 and you're able to drill your brass. You got to drill in the center of this. I have a lathe, so I just chuck this up in the lathe and drill the end of it. Some people have a good eye, but quite honestly, you don't have to be completely exact with the hole in the brass or the hole in the copper. And the reason why is before you solder it up, before you put flux on there and do a little solder job, right? If the holes are 1/4 inch, which is what I drilled for all of them, right? Gives you the ability to move this around a little bit. And quite honestly, the answer to the quiz, if you put a 1/4, 20, 7/16 through that hole and that hole, and before you completely tighten up the bolt in the center, you slide it so that the 7/16 bolt is just barely touching this on both sides. At that point, you're centered up and you could solder it up. If you don't put a bolt through this, I found that when you solder, these things drift around. This moves around, right? It's also hard to make it work. You end up with solder on this side or on this side, right where the flanges are, and that becomes a pest. I also found that if you set it up such that this is standing perfectly flat and upright, it solders better. If you're tilted at all, you kind of end up in trouble. So making it stand upright is better. Perhaps by using a flat type bolt there, and once again, make it stand upright. You know, how do I cut the brass? I use a 4.5 inch grinder, protective eyewear, right? Grinding wheels like to fly apart. As you're cutting the metal off of this, sometimes pieces of that fly. So be well aware of that there will be flying objects. Not that there may be, there will be flying objects. And if you're unlucky enough to get one of those harpooning at you, if you're wearing protective wear, chances are you won't get hurt. Anyway, I got to finish this up. We'll smash it on there with the carburetor, and we'll see if we can't get this puppy fired up much more easily. Finally cleaned up the area around the lathe. Anyway, as you're going to drill this, you can see I got the 1.25 inch end cap chucked in the lathe. You guys can see I'm drilling this. I've really found that it's best to start with a smaller step drill, then work your way up to the bigger guy, and depending on how big, finish off with that at the end. These smaller steps just seem to work so much easier. You can see how hard this is to do. Right. You could also do it with a hand drill, and then you will be off-centered. Trust me, I've tried a million times with a hand drill. And then you could use a rotary file to straighten things up. These could be pretty ugly and still work very well. So this flange is done. You can see how everything is beautifully centered. So much so the bolts don't want to let go. Right? How's that for beautiful? I just got to make up a cardboard gasket, grab a carburetor, we'll smash it on, we'll have that thing running in a couple of seconds. Okay, let's see if it fires up. On, choke. Yes, and probably out of gas. I only put gas in the bowl. So anyway, there we have it. It starts a lot easier. It idles better. Still not running right. I think this motor might have another couple of issues. Probably what I'm going to do next is, well, adjust up the valves. That'll probably help it. I didn't change the spark plug, which is really bad. My bad on that. I should have done that very first thing. I mean, the carburetor obviously had some issues, so I'm glad I swapped that out. But, you know, we're getting there. Bringing these lawn art vehicles to daily runners always takes a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and you got to kind of chip away at it one little piece at a time. Anyway, I want to thank you all for dropping by to watch and comment, subscribe. Please remember, feet down, heads up. Make sure you get out and enjoy each and every day. And stay away from this COVID stuff. I'm still not quite right. Bye now.